Your lawyers advised you then not to submit to police questions. Why not, people say? Wouldn't you have wanted to tell them everything?
Well, I don't recall that our lawyers told us that at the time. We said, yeah, we want to keep working with you, but can't you come here? We can't go out. Patsy was in bed. Patsy was barely able to move.
The role of Jhon Ramsey in the investigation into his daughter's death has been a subject of intense scrutiny and debate. As the first person to discover JonBenét in the basement, his immediate actions were those of a distraught father. He picked her up and carried her upstairs. This act, however, unintentionally but significantly compromised the integrity of the scene, potentially removing or obscuring crucial evidence. Yet, in the initial stages of the inquiry, the focus of law enforcement appeared to be less on him than on his wife, Patsy, and son, Burke. As the head of the household, some have questioned this perceived lack of scrutiny. Was he simply a grieving father caught in an unimaginable tragedy? Or did he possess a deeper knowledge of the events that transpired that night? Before we analyze the suspicions in the case, please tell me where you saw this video from. I will read it all and spread it to the world. JonBenét Ramsey was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, and pursued higher education at Michigan State University, earning a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and later an MBA. His early career included military service with the U.S. Navy's Civil Engineer Corps, serving in the Philippines, and later in a reserve unit. A licensed pilot, he owned 2 private planes. In his personal life, John's family was complex. He first married Lucinda Pash in 1966, with whom he had 3 children, before their divorce in 1978. In 1980, he married Patsy Ramsey, and together they had 2 children, Burke and JonBenét. As a father, he was the family's primary provider, raising his children in an affluent household in Boulder, Colorado. Professionally, Jhon Ramsey achieved considerable success. In 1989, he founded a company that would merge to form Access Graphics, a computer services firm. As president and CEO, he led the company to generate over £1 billion in revenue by 1996, at which point his net worth was estimated at over £6 million. His success earned him the title of Entrepreneur of the Year from the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. Weeks before Christmas, he received a substantial bonus of £118,000, a figure that would later become a key element in the investigation. In the days leading up to the 25th of December, Jhon was actively engaged in family and community life. While Patsy primarily managed JonBenét's participation in children's beauty pageants, Jhon was a supportive presence. The family also maintained close ties with Boulder's influential community. On the 23rd of December, the Ramsey family first hosted their own Christmas party, welcoming dozens of guests. During this event, a Santa Claus impersonator visited, and Patsy gave JonBenét a gold bracelet engraved with the date 25/12/96. That same evening, the family attended another Christmas party at the home of their close friends, Fleet and Priscilla White. Concurrently, preparations were underway for a family trip to their holiday home in Michigan, where Jhon, an experienced pilot, had arranged to fly them after Christmas. That evening, a mysterious 999 call was made from the Ramsey home, but was disconnected. When police called back and an officer was dispatched, a family friend assured them it had been an accidental call, and no report was filed. On Christmas Day, the family celebrated at home, with JonBenét receiving a bicycle. That evening, Jhon was noted to have carried a tired JonBenét up to her bed. In the early hours of December 26, 1996, the household stirred with urgency. At approximately 5:30 a.m., Patsy Ramsey awoke to prepare for their planned family trip. Shortly after, she checked on JonBenét and discovered she was not in her room. Around 5:45 a.m., Patsy found a 3-page ransom note on the back staircase. Written on paper from a household notepad, it demanded precisely £118,000, the exact amount of John's recent Christmas bonus, and claimed JonBenét had been abducted. She alerted Jhon, and together they searched the house, confirming their son, Burke, was safely asleep, but finding no trace of JonBenét. By 5:52 a.m., Patsy had dialed 999, reporting her daughter's disappearance in a frantic call. The 999 call made by Patsy Ramsey presents a number of linguistic and behavioral anomalies that have led analysts to question its authenticity. From the beginning, her responses diverge from what might be expected in a genuine emergency. Instead of directly answering the operator's initial question, "What's going on?" Patsy begins by stating her address, a move that suggests to some the possibility of a pre-rehearsed sequence of responses. Her next words, "We have a kidnapping," are notably passive and impersonal. The use of "we" instead of "I" or "my daughter" is striking, as it dilutes personal responsibility and emotional connection, creating a psychological distance from the victim. As the call continues, this lack of emotional immediacy becomes more apparent. Patsy repeatedly refers to a ransom note before explicitly stating her daughter is missing, subtly shifting the focus from a lost child to a found object, a prioritization that seems unnatural for a distressed parent. She continues to use collective pronouns like "our daughter" instead of "my daughter," which undermines the personal grief one would expect. Her choice of words also stands out. She repeats "please" multiple times, and while politeness isn't inherently suspicious, excessive courtesy in an emergency call can be an indicator of deceptive behavior, an unconscious attempt to appear cooperative. She also frequently uses the word "just," which can be a linguistic tool to narrow scope and deflect deeper inquiry. More concerning to some analysts is what is missing from the call. Patsy never speculates about a possible perpetrator or mentions any signs of a break-in. She also fails to bring up the ransom note's explicit warning against contacting the police, a detail that a person genuinely afraid for their child's life would almost certainly mention. Most disturbingly to some analysts, there is an utter lack of expressed concern for JonBenét's immediate safety. Patsy never asked the operator for advice on what to do or what might be happening to her daughter. The absence of these natural, urgent concerns is considered alarming by some. That said, certain responses, such as her saying "I don't know" to factual questions, may indicate truthfulness, as deceptive individuals are often reluctant to admit a lack of knowledge. Perhaps the most revealing moment comes after the main call appears to end. Unbeknownst to Patsy, the line remained open, and background audio captured what seems to be an exchange between multiple people. One voice, believed to be Jhon Ramsey, says, "We aren't speaking to you," while another, likely Patsy's, asks, "What did you do?" These comments appear directed at their son, Burke, who the Ramseys claimed had been asleep the entire time. This unscripted moment introduces the possibility of internal family conflict and undermines the narrative presented in the call. Following Patsy Ramsey's 999 call, police arrived at the home. Jhon Ramsey initially cooperated, providing details about the ransom note. In the midst of the crisis, he reached out to close friends, including Fleet and Priscilla White, who arrived at the house that morning, moving freely through the home before it was properly secured. This decision to invite friends, despite the note's warning, raised suspicions. The presence of outsiders potentially compromised evidence, prompting questions about whether this disruption was intentional. Though no direct evidence supports such intent, the lack of control over the scene, with friends reportedly cleaning the kitchen, was seen as unusual, but could also be attributed to panic. Throughout the morning, Jhon participated in a limited search of the house. Details of his actions are sparse, leading some to question whether he was actively searching. This perceived lack of urgency was deemed unusual, though it could reflect adherence to police instructions or emotional shock. The 999 dispatcher, Kim Archuleta, noted that Jhon appeared calmer than Patsy, a demeanor some found inconsistent with the expected panic of a parent, although this could align with Jhon's composed nature as a successful businessman. Around 1:00 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt instructed Jhon and Fleet White to conduct a thorough search of the house. They went directly to the basement, where Jhon opened the door to a small storage room. There, he discovered JonBenét on the floor, covered by a white blanket, with duct tape over her mouth and a ligature around her neck. In a moment of distress, he removed the tape, lifted his daughter, and carried her upstairs. This action was highly suspicious to investigators, as it disturbed critical evidence. Detective Arndt later described a wordless exchange with Jhon that left her suspecting his involvement. The choice to check the basement directly also raised questions, with some suggesting he might have known her location, though his emotional outburst could equally reflect a father's instinctive reaction to a horrific discovery. The JonBenét Ramsey case hinges on a collection of evidence that has fueled decades of speculation. The ransom note, written on household paper, demanded £118,000, matching Jhon's Christmas bonus. Its theatrical language and insider knowledge led behavioral analysts to suggest it was written by someone close to the family, with suspicion falling on Patsy due to inconclusive handwriting analysis. Jhon and Burke were excluded as authors. The note's on-site creation and the absence of any follow-up from a kidnapper suggest a possible staging. JonBenét's death was determined to be from asphyxiation via a garrote made from a broken paintbrush owned by Patsy, in addition to a severe skull fracture. Injuries were noted that suggested a possible sexual motive, although this was complicated by the absence of certain biological evidence. The discovery of pineapple in her stomach conflicted with her parents' claim that she hadn't eaten that night. A bowl of pineapple in the kitchen bore Burke's fingerprints, though their age could not be determined. The garrote's sophisticated design and other evidence support an intruder theory, but the use of household items keeps the family under scrutiny. Unidentified male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing and under her fingernails is the strongest evidence supporting an intruder. This DNA, not matching any Ramsey family member or any entry in the CODIS database, led District Attorney Mary Lacey to publicly exonerate the Ramseys in 2008. Experts argue this DNA likely belongs to the perpetrator, though others suggest it could be trace contamination. This evidence significantly weakens the case against the family while pointing to an unknown male. Additional physical evidence further complicates the case. A broken basement window was cited by investigator Lou Smith as a possible entry point, though intact cobwebs suggested it hadn't been recently used. A boot print in the basement, not matching any family member, and an unidentified hair on the blanket bolster the intruder theory. A rope and a flashlight found in the house add to the mystery without conclusive links. Suspected stun gun marks on JonBenét's back were supported by some experts but disputed by others. Enhanced audio of the 999 call detected background voices, including one resembling Burke's, contradicting claims he slept through the night. It is readily apparent that Jhon Ramsey is connected to nearly every key piece of evidence, yet the links are consistently too weak to solidify him as a suspect. From discovering his daughter and disturbing the scene to the ransom note referencing his exact bonus, he is entangled in the narrative. However, handwriting analysis ruled him out as the note's author. DNA evidence did not match him, and his actions can be explained as a father's emotional response. Despite these connections, the lack of conclusive evidence ensures Jhon remains on the periphery of suspicion, never fully implicated. One of the most disturbing accounts came from Detective Linda Arndt, the first investigator at the Ramsey home, who articulated her suspicions about Jhon Ramsey's involvement, particularly focusing on the moment he carried his daughter from the basement. Her suspicion was not based on a single action, but on an accumulation of factors: the lack of forced entry, the absence of any disturbance during the night, Jhon being the last to see JonBenét alive, and the peculiarities of the ransom note. However, her testimony heavily emphasized the unusual manner in which he carried JonBenét as a pivotal reason for her belief. She described him holding his daughter with his arms around her upper legs, her body extended upward and away from his, preventing him from seeing her face. This posture struck Aunt as unnatural for a father discovering his deceased child, as it suggested a deliberate distancing rather than the expected cradling of a loved one. Aunt found it particularly striking that Jhon carried her in a way that seemed detached, contrasting with typical parental instincts. Additionally, his ability to go directly to the basement's wine cellar where JonBenét was found raised questions for Aunt, as the police had not thoroughly searched that area earlier. While these observations fueled her suspicion, they remained subjective, lacking corroborating physical evidence, and could be interpreted as a father's instinctive reaction under extreme distress rather than an indication of guilt. Many have argued that Jhon Ramsey's apparent insulation from more intense scrutiny stemmed from his wealth and influence. Throughout the investigation, several details raised genuine questions about his involvement. In the JonBenét Ramsey case, several inconsistencies in his statements have been flagged, raising suspicions about his motives, though none conclusively proved his culpability. One significant issue emerged shortly after he discovered JonBenét around 1 p.m. on December 26th. Approximately 20 minutes later, a detective overheard Jhon arranging a flight to Atlanta, claiming an urgent business meeting despite police instructions to remain in Boulder. The claim seemed implausible for a father so soon after such a tragic discovery, suggesting to some a possible panic or an attempt to distance himself from the investigation. Another inconsistency involves his account of the night of December 25th. Initially, he told officers he read to both children before bed. Months later, he claimed JonBenét was asleep when they returned, a version he maintained thereafter. This contradiction raises questions about whether he was crafting a narrative to obscure events that night. His claim of leaving the house for 90 minutes on the morning of December 26th to retrieve mail also drew suspicion, as the Ramsey home received mail through a front door slot. This unexplained absence during a critical period suggested he might have been attending to something he wished to conceal, although it could also reflect a need for solitude. Conflicting accounts between Jhon and Patsy Ramsey about who decided to call 999 further fueled suspicion. Patsy claimed it was her idea, while Jhon told CNN's Ted Koppel that he instructed her to call immediately, despite the ransom note's warning. This discrepancy is significant, as it could hint at coordination issues between the couple. Finally, Jhon's statement that he found a basement window open on the morning of December 26th, closed it, and did not report it, is highly suspicious. Other witnesses who inspected the basement earlier noted no open window, contradicting his claim. This could imply a motive to fabricate evidence of an intruder, especially since he had previously admitted to breaking that same window. Collectively, these alleged inconsistencies suggest possible motives of concealing involvement or staging an external crime. However, the absence of physical evidence linking him to the incident, coupled with DNA evidence that later exonerated the family, leaves these suspicions as points of doubt rather than proof. Several additional points have fueled speculation. The autopsy findings indicated trauma estimated to have occurred 7 to 10 days before her death, leading some theorists to hypothesize about prolonged abuse as a potential motive, suggesting Jhon as a central figure in the household, might have been aware of or responsible for it. While this theory casts suspicion, no direct evidence confirms his involvement, and the family was cleared by DNA. Another point involves unconfirmed reports of fibers matching Jhon's shirt found in JonBenét's underwear. If accurate, this could suggest direct contact, but the information was never officially verified, rendering it speculative. His admission that he broke a basement window months earlier further complicates his narrative. The window was later considered a potential entry point for an intruder, but his prior damage raised doubts, suggesting he might have exaggerated this story to support an intruder theory, though intact cobwebs undermined the idea of recent use. Some theories shift suspicion from Patsy to Jhon, positing that she may have assisted in a cover-up, such as writing the ransom note, while he was the primary perpetrator. This hypothesis suggests Jhon manipulated Patsy to protect himself. Additionally, unverified rumors of missing CCTV footage from a private airport have fueled speculation that he intentionally hid evidence, possibly using his resources to influence the investigation. While these points raise questions, the absence of concrete evidence, coupled with DNA pointing to an unidentified male, keeps these suspicions speculative. Based on the available information, one particular theory has taken shape, originating not from tabloid speculation, but from an ex-CIA analyst trained to dissect behavior and uncover hidden agendas. This hypothesis posits that Jhon Ramsey orchestrated a calculated cover-up to protect himself from allegations of prior misconduct concerning JonBenét, manipulating his wife Patsy Ramsey and son Burke Ramsey to deflect suspicion. According to this theory, after returning from a Christmas party, Burke, irritated while playing, struck JonBenét with an object. When she did not wake, he alerted Patsy, who in turn summoned Jhon. Believing JonBenét had died, Jhon allegedly devised a plan to shield himself from a potential autopsy revealing past misconduct, which he feared would implicate him. It is suggested he convinced a panicked Patsy that Burke's accidental blow would ruin the family, persuading her to stage a kidnapping while intending for the evidence to point to her alone. This hypothesis continues that Jhon instructed Patsy to write a ransom note using household paper and referencing his £118,000 bonus to ensure it implicated her. Meanwhile, it is theorized that Jhon staged an assault on JonBenét using one of Patsy's paintbrushes to create misleading evidence, wiped down items linked to himself and Burke, and disposed of his clothes while leaving Patsy's evidence intact. The garrote, made from Patsy's paintbrush, was used in what they believed was a staging, but which tragically resulted in her death. Realizing that disposing of their daughter was too risky, Jhon allegedly altered the plan, convincing Patsy to hide JonBenét in the basement and invite friends over to contaminate the scene. He approved the poorly written note and pushed for an immediate 999 call. During the call, Burke is believed to have briefly appeared, asking, "What did you find?" indicating he knew something was wrong. John's alibi was simple. He claimed to have slept all night. Burke's was identical. Patsy, burdened with inconsistent stories, contradicted herself frequently. As the theory suggests, Jhon intended. The plan, according to this hypothesis, succeeded due to investigative missteps, leveraging the situation to ensure overwhelming evidence pointed towards Patsy, protecting him from allegations while leaving no provable link to his orchestration. Under the relentless scrutiny of the media, the Ramsey family did not retreat, but prepared to fight. They assembled a formidable defense, including top-tier lawyers, seasoned private investigators, and forensic psychologists. Among them was Lou Smith, a veteran homicide detective known for solving difficult cases, hired not to clear their names blindly, but to find facts. Simultaneously, they shielded their young son, Burke, from the chaos. Jhon Ramsey did not retreat from the public eye. Time and again he faced television cameras, his words calm yet sharp. "I did not kill my daughter." To some, he was a father wrongly accused. To others, a man hiding behind a polished mask. In the court of public opinion, his battle had only just begun. As public outrage escalated, quiet discoveries within the evidence began to tell a different story. Forensic analysts uncovered a critical finding: traces of unidentified male DNA on JonBenét's clothing. The genetic material did not match Jhon, Patsy, or Burke Ramsey. This discovery dismantled the prevailing theory. For years, whispers of abuse had circulated, but medical records revealed no such history. Beyond the laboratory, physical evidence began to shift the narrative. A broken basement window, long overlooked, was re-evaluated. Beneath it, a suitcase, placed deliberately, suggested the presence of an intruder. Perhaps the most damning evidence of all was procedural. The Boulder Police Department's early investigation was riddled with missteps. They failed to secure the scene, allowing friends and family to roam freely, compromising critical evidence. Entire rooms were ignored during initial searches. Against this backdrop, two unlikely figures emerged to challenge the official narrative. Lou Smith, through meticulous analysis, found patterns pointing not to an insider, but to an outsider, premeditated and calculating. His conclusion was clear. The Ramseys were not responsible. He was not alone. John Douglas, one of the FBI's most renowned criminal profilers, also reviewed the case. His profile painted a disturbing picture of a perpetrator fixated on the family from afar, seeing no indicators that the incident was connected to anyone inside the house. Both men independently reached the same chilling conclusion: the person responsible was still at large. Their voices offered clarity in a case clouded by noise, a revelation that hit like a fault line beneath the foundation of everything people thought they understood. For years, Jhon Ramsey's name had been synonymous with guilt. To many, he was not just connected to the crime. He was the crime. His face had become an icon of parental betrayal, but as the DNA evidence emerged, it began to unravel that narrative. The new information arrived quietly in lab reports and expert testimonies. Suddenly, the man once painted as a calculating suspect was seen in a different light, less as the architect of deceit, and more as a figure caught in the crosshairs of an investigation driven by assumption rather than evidence. The media, once ravenous, now treaded cautiously. Yet even as the official narrative shifted, doubt never fully disappeared. Jhon Ramsey may have escaped the grip of legal suspicion, but in the minds of many, he would forever occupy a strange space. Neither fully guilty nor entirely innocent, a man trapped in the gray zone of America's most infamous unsolved crime. The breakthrough did not come from a confession or a surprise witness, but quietly, from deep within a laboratory report. A DNA sample, male and unidentified, found on JonBenét Ramsey's clothing. The test result was beyond dispute. It was not from Jhon Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, or their son, Burke Ramsey. For the first time since that Christmas night in 1996, there was hard, physical evidence that the Ramsey family had not been alone in their house. That DNA told its own story. A story of another presence, of an unknown intruder. There was no longer room for speculation, only a cold, immutable fact. If the DNA did not belong to the Ramseys, it had to belong to someone else. In that moment, the investigation shifted. Not because the police or the media willed it, but because science demanded it. From the very first moments, the investigation was unraveling. The Ramsey home should have been locked down, but it was not. Officers allowed friends and neighbors to walk in and out freely, contaminating the scene. Crucial spaces, including the very basement where JonBenét was later discovered, were ignored in the initial walkthrough. The most basic forensic protocols were delayed. Detectives missed clear signs, marks on windows, unusual objects, potential points of entry. By the time authorities realized the gravity of their oversights, it was too late. The crime scene was no longer a puzzle to be solved. It was a shattered mirror, impossible to piece back together. He was not brought in to defend the Ramseys, but to find the truth. Lou Smit was a veteran investigator with a reputation for seeing what others missed. As he pored over the case files, a different picture began to form. The broken basement window was not just broken, it was an invitation. The suitcase positioned beneath it was not random. It was a step. Marks on the wall, disturbed debris. They all told the same story. To Smit, it was clear this was not the work of a family member, but of a predator from the outside who had entered with intent. He stood against the tide of public opinion and made his position clear. He believed Jhon and Patsy Ramsey were innocent, not because they seemed trustworthy, but because the evidence told him so. He was not called to analyze fingerprints or DNA. His expertise was understanding the mind of a perpetrator. John Douglas, one of the most renowned criminal profilers in FBI history, stripped away the noise and focused solely on behavior. He saw no signs of an impulsive act born from family tension. Instead, what emerged from the evidence was something colder, more calculated. A deliberate offender who harbored deep resentment toward the Ramsey family. Someone who had studied them and chosen their moment to strike. Douglas found no behavioral evidence pointing to Jhon, Patsy, or Burke. In his professional opinion, this was a crime of obsession. He agreed with Lou Smit. The Ramseys were not the perpetrators. The real danger had not come from inside the home. It had come from outside, where it still remained. Time moved forward, but inside the walls of the Ramsey household, the shadow never lifted. Years after DNA shattered the original theory, one truth remained. JonBenét's killer had never been caught. For Jhon Ramsey, vindication was not enough. The question still lingered. Who left behind that DNA? The investigation had grown cold, but he was not done. He pushed for advanced DNA testing, urging investigators to use the newest technology. He lobbied lawmakers for new policies, giving victims' families the right to demand case reviews. In every rare public appearance, his message remained the same. This case could still be solved. The person responsible was still out there, and JonBenét still deserved justice. Yet, for all the science and scrutiny, one chilling question remained. Would the truth ever be found? Or had the real perpetrator simply vanished into history? After the case, Jhon Ramsey, once thrust into the heart of a sensational mystery, gradually retreated from the relentless spotlight. The man who stood before cameras, fiercely defending his family, chose to step away. In rare appearances, his message remained unwavering. His family was innocent, the killer remained at large, and the case was far from resolved. His withdrawal marked a shift from loud advocacy to a quieter resolve, carrying the same burden in solitude. The years following the investigation brought profound personal losses. In 2006, he lost his wife, Patsy, to ovarian cancer. This was not his first tragedy. In 1992, he had buried his eldest daughter, Elizabeth, after a car accident, a grief that lingered long before the loss of JonBenét. These losses left Jhon Ramsey increasingly isolated, his inner circle shrinking. Grief transformed him into a quieter, more withdrawn figure, no longer seeking public attention, but surviving in the shadows of a life marked by unrelenting tragedy. Seeking escape from Boulder, a city synonymous with his pain, he relocated, craving anonymity. In 2011, he remarried Jhon Rousseau, and together they crafted a private existence. Yet, even in this new chapter, he quietly continued his fight for justice. In 2012, he published The Other Side of Suffering, a memoir reflecting not on the case, but on surviving grief and suspicion. His mission centered on advancing the investigation through science, particularly forensic genealogy, which he believed could identify the perpetrator from the DNA left behind. He relentlessly pressed the Boulder Police Department to use these modern tools, accusing them of neglect and incompetence. He also advocated for legislation to empower families of victims to demand fresh investigations. Despite his retreat, Jhon remains a polarizing figure. To some, he is a wrongly accused father crushed by a failed justice system. To others, he is an enigma tied to lingering contradictions. His name is inseparable from the case, a symbol of both suspicion and tragedy. Yet his story highlights a human cost often overlooked. A father who lived with the profound silence of his daughter's absence, compounded by the losses of his eldest daughter, Elizabeth, and his wife, Patsy Ramsey. Decades later, the case remains unsolved. JonBenét Ramsey's killer has never been brought to justice. But while the truth still hides in shadows, the public's perception of Jhon Ramsey has shifted. He is no longer widely seen as the prime suspect. As new evidence emerged and the investigation's failures came to light, his image slowly changed. Now, he is often spoken of not as a villain, but as a victim of a broken system and a media machine that fed on grief. One thing remains: the DNA. It is the last thread connecting this case to the possibility of truth. It has outlived detectives and headlines. Today, it stands as the only undeniable piece of evidence left. For many, including Jhon Ramsey himself, this DNA is not just another clue. It is the key, the one remaining chance to unlock what really happened. Hope now lies in technology that did not exist in 1996. Forensic genealogy and advanced DNA databases offer the possibility of finding the name behind that genetic code. But that hope depends on the willingness of those holding the evidence to act. In the end, the case leaves us with a question that no detective or court has ever been able to fully answer. Was Jhon Ramsey simply a father, devastated by grief? Or is there still something more, something hidden beneath decades of noise and silence? The story, like so many others, does not end with answers. It ends with what remains: questions, doubt, and silence. In the world of unsolved crimes, some cases are more than puzzles. They are mirrors reflecting what we fear most: the unknown, the misunderstood, and the possibility that some truths are meant to stay buried. In a positive viewpoint, the JonBenét Ramsey case exposed significant flaws in police procedures, prompting positive changes in law enforcement. The Boulder Police Department's initial mishandling became a catalyst for reform. Departments nationwide began emphasizing stricter crime scene protocols, ensuring immediate lockdowns to preserve evidence. Training programs now stress forensic awareness, teaching officers to avoid the chaos that marred the Ramsey investigation. The case also highlighted the importance of interagency collaboration and spurred the adoption of new technologies like forensic genealogy, which has since solved major cold cases like the Golden State Killer. Furthermore, the case underscored the need for unbiased investigations, prompting training to avoid the tunnel vision that can derail justice. Jhon Ramsey's advocacy has also empowered victims' families, influencing legislation that gives them the right to demand case reviews. These reforms, born from the failures of this case, have strengthened investigative rigor and prioritized objectivity, ensuring that future cases benefit from the lessons learned in Boulder. As the story fades and the final questions hang in the air, we are left to confront the echoes of this tragedy. Think of the faces: a smiling 6-year-old girl, a family torn apart, investigators facing a puzzle they could not solve. After weighing the evidence, the theories, and the profound human cost, where do you stand? Does this case change how you view justice, the media, or the very nature of truth itself? What responsibility do we have as observers to remember these stories not as entertainment, but as enduring lessons in a search for answers that may never truly end?